Welcome to the review of our shir on Parshat Ki-Tavo, Tavshin Ayin Vav. So what we've been doing lately, as we're going to do tonight, is to first go over the Ptuchot and Stumot, and then be able to get a sense of the overall issues in the Parsha, and from there, move on to getting the overall picture of how these various Ptuchot and Stumot interrelate, and what the Chiddush is in the Parsha. So one thing is clear, and that is that the Parsha itself clearly represents perhaps the central Parsha in the identity of Klal Yisrael. And the proof of that is, of course, that, oh my gosh, I forgot to start the audio recording. That's not over to you. That's what happens when there's no audio. There's no sound, or video manager. No, I know, but you have other things I want you to do now. It's not the time to argue. Thank you.
You're just not the type.
The type?
It's going to be a rough night. I can see it coming.
This is awesome. We should get a beginning.
Sorry, everyone. Let's try that again, okay? Because I didn't have the sound recording. You could probably keep the same notes like that, but I'll change it. But you never know. All right, so welcome to our review of Parshas Ki-Tavo, Tavshin Ayin Vav, and what we do, what I hope to do tonight, is first go through the Ptuchot and Stumot, as we've been doing recently, and then get to see the overall structure of the Parsha. So one of the first things that we note is that the Parsha opens up. Of course, this is a Parsha that up until now, since the time of the original Re'eh, what we've seen is that all of the Parshas are so fundamentally related that they don't even have a separate Parsha Ptucha that necessarily opens the center. This Parsha and the next that brings us up to the second Re'eh, which is a Chaim Ve'atov, and above it Va'ara, which is a deeper expression of Bracha U'Klala, and leads to Bacharta B'Chaim. These are separate sidres in the sense that they have a completely new opening, and therefore we need to see them as more central in introducing something new that hasn't been part of the original Re'eh that we began the whole structure of the Tzvah Dvorim with. And since that first Ptucha is in fact the Parsha of Harami Oved Avi, and that Parsha of Harami Oved Avi we know is the mocha of our identity in terms of giving over a sense of that identity to the Dares Haboim, and that's the Vigarat Levincha. That Vigarat Levincha is just these few lines. As the Mishnah says, the Rambam Pasuk Halacha, V'hu she'yidrosh Rami Oved Avi ad sof kol ha'parasha. So the Rami Oved Avi includes within it, despite the fact that it's so few words, and is only merames to the Nisan of Mitzrayim, the Makkos of Mitzrayim in ways that we have to darshan, as we do in the Haggadah, all of the Makkos is from Ramazim. But that is the Ikar Mitzvah of remembering what happened in Mitzrayim. And of course, the thing that makes it even more powerful is the fact that it is the Parsha of Bikurim. The Parsha of Bikurim is the Parsha of K'nisa La'aretz, and the entire problem of the construction of the Haggadah was the response of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Yodoah Tedat Avram Avinu, who asked B'ma Eda. And here is the Haftarah's actuality. It's all very nice to say, Yodoah Tedat in the future. But in the Parsha Bikurim, he got it to Yom Kibati Allah. So this is the ultimate kiyum of the Yadot Teda. And not surprisingly, in being the ultimate kiyum of the Yadot Teda, it is also the only place in the Torah where we're told, V'lo Hashem lachem leiv lada'at ad hayom hazeh. So in other words, the actual achievement of the very das that Avraham Avinu was asking about, B'ma'ida, becomes with this parsha translated back from the very beginning of the Yadoah Teda that addresses that B'ma'ida into the parsha of Bia La'aretz. And again, not surprisingly, although I've never been able to find a mocker in the halacha or anybody, but it's so obvious that I don't think it needs a raya. But the reason that all of this is true is because the mitzvah, V'yigadet Elovincha, is by definition a function of Higadet Hayom. Otherwise, why would we focus on here? The only other place that we have in the Torah, V'yigadet is here. So if the V'yigadet Elovincha is here in terms of Arami Ovidavi, then this must be the essence of our identity, both from the beginning, in terms of the actual Bechir of Avraham Avinu, and that's the simple meaning of the Arami Ovidavi, with his Oved, in terms of being lost, Mushka Bur Kasdim, as the Rambam puts it, into the ultimate Knesset La'aretz, which is the final vindication of the bris of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Which means that the original bris, which was the bris on Knesset La'aretz, becomes ultimately bris of Har Moab, which becomes the bris of Har Grizim and Har Eva. And again, not surprisingly, Har Grizim and Har Eva are chosen because that's the first place that Avraham Avinu sees Ad Makom Shem. And what did he see in Ad Makom Shem? As Rashi says over there, he saw Klal Yisrael being the top of the bris in Har Grizim and Har Eva, which is, you must admit, sort of circular reasoning, but that's the whole point. It is indeed circular reasoning, in which the snake bites its own tail. And the clarity of the entire structure of history is linked, beginnings to end, through this question of das and the development of the das, which is the das of the Yetzias Mitzrayim, Leman Teda, which is true of Mitzrayim, true of Yisrael, and so on. That entire year was to achieve that first dark of das, into the Ad Hayom Hazeh, which is the das that is offered in the achievement of the bris here. So again, it isn't surprising at all that we should be dealing with this new bris in terms of ultimate bris. What is surprising is that the words Ki-Tavo seem to be used in completely different ways in exactly the same words, because first of all, the simple meaning of Vahaya, as the Sifri brings. The Lashon Vahaya is immediate. Vahaya means that, so when that happens. But the other Sifri says that the meaning of the year is Kayem Mitzvah Zu, which is a kind of formula that we heard in a number of places. Kayem Mitzvah Zu Shebizchuta Tikanes La'aretz. That always refers to not the Etzem Knisa, but rather a mitzvah that is mentioned in that, let's say, by the original Ki-Tavo, not Tefillin. So there too it says, Kayem mitzvah Zu Shebizchuta Tikanes La'aretz, refers to the mitzvah Bechor. Here, the related Ki-Tavo refers to mitzvah Bechor in terms of Teres, which is Bikurim. So the Pashtus is that it's a reference to Bikurim. In reality, the Bikurim is beferish only Nachala V'Rishta, which means it's only Achar Shiva Shekavshu and the Shiva Shechilku. So then it's not Miyad. What is Miyad, and is absolutely Miyad, is what the Parsha itself is about, which all of a sudden seems short-circuited with the Parsha of Bikurim on an individual level. So when you read Vaya Ki-Tavo La'aretz, so what do you hear? You hear that Moshe Rabbeinu is speaking to Klal Yisrael. You'll come to Eretz Yisrael. I want you to come to Har Grizim and Har Eva. And that, as it says, Bo Bayom. That has to be the very same day. To the extent that the Mepharshim are troubled, I mean, for heaven's sakes, to take 1 million people on the very same day that they're nichnas after wandering all of these years, and to say that on that day they have to go, but certainly, according to the Pashtus, the way we understand it, it means that they have to travel 120 kilometers on one day, which is, not the Derech HaTeva, but for Machane Yisrael. So they had to go from Gilgal to Agrizim Areval, do the bris, build the Mizbeach, come back to Gilgal, it's unbelievable. And that all has to be done indeed. Yeah, that does have to be done today, specifically today. So as this footnote says, it's a beautiful chat, but it's what the Torah is mechayev for, is that why in the world would we have to do such a thing? Why not wait a couple of days or whatever? Obviously, whatever chat you say is because it's not possible to wait, since it's definitive of the nature of the Knesset. If you think that you could, it's all without that type of understanding, then you destroy the whole Knesset. The Knesset, therefore, is immediate. So what is that understanding? The understanding is that there cannot be any compromises. Eretz Yisrael is not a land of compromise. It's either absolute excellence or total destruction. So if it's bracha v'klala, there's nothing on the tzad amibutza. It's only what the brachas and klalas and ramas do here. That is so much a part of the nature of Eretz Yisrael that it's essential to do it on the very day of the Knesset, because it defines Yerusha. But then that means that the words themselves tend in two opposite directions. One is after Yerusha, Yeshiva, and the other is on the very same day. So that makes it even more difficult for how it is that we sort of hijack the meaning of the opening of Ki-Tavo. The Torah itself hijacks the meaning from the Vahaya Ki-Tavo in terms of the bris and our grizim and our evo, which is the pashtus of what the whole Seder is about, and instead takes a brief sideline about the individual's Parshas Bikurim, where he's bringing Reishis Kol Pri Adama on that day. Furthermore, forget about the fact that it's 14 years. It's not national, it's individual. It's set to the individual. It's going to be what maybe the care. And furthermore, it doesn't happen in the actual Knesset Eretz of Klal Yisrael. It happens on the individual's Knesset, meaning, as the Mechilta writes, Shloye Yerushas Eretz Yisrael ki Yerushas Avosecha ki ela ki'ilu bo bayom nichnas. So if that's the case, what appears to be talking about the day of the national Knesset Eretz Yisrael turns into meaning something else on every level. It's not on the day, it's after the years, it's not the nation, it's the individual. And although one could say that remarkably, Yoshua actually said Arami Ovilavi on the day of the Knesset, in a sense. Because, at least in the process of the Knesset, because and that's what we say in the Haggadah, which is why we say it in the Haggadah. That is Aram Yovilavi in his words. So Aram Yovilavi is the Av who's Mushka Burkaste, Terach Avi Avram Avi Nochar, as Rambam says, Vuhu Ovedi Mahem, Aviv, and Mishpach, that's Terach Avi Avram Avi Nochar. And so that's exactly what he's doing. As he took Yoshua, the Parsha of Aram Yovilavi, translated it.
And he said it in Shechem on the day.
Oh, yeah, so he said it as part of this.
At the same places where the bris took place is where he said it.
Yes. Yes. So in other words, he's making it part of the simple meaning of the Vahaya Ki-Tavo. Further integrated. So it has multi-level where it's hard to see. To throw this in the middle, we're concentrating on the bris. We started with Ray. We're going to Ray, and it would be so dramatic to finally get to the real thing, which is the next p'tucha. So that is very much a strange thing, but I want to point out that it is also fundamentally related to the ending of the parsha, in which, where we come to the Ada Yom Hazeh, the Natan Hashem Lachem Lev Ladas, which is all the way at the end in the final parsha in the Sedra. Natan Hashem Lachem Lev Ladas. So Rashi says over there, the pshat in Lev Ladas is lahakir b'chasdei amok. The Sifri says that the meaning of the words, which is amazing, of the Amarta Elav, you got it here, but the Amarta Elav is She'eni Kafui Tova, which means that the Haskalah of the Parsha, which is not clear b'chlal. I mean, how does that lie in the words of the Amarta Elav means She'eni Kafui Tova? But that means that the beginning of the Parsha is directly related to its dramatic ending of Ada Yom Hazeh. So if you're saying any kafui tova, again, we've discussed many times the obvious kasha of why the Amarta not only means any kafui tova, why it means any kafui tova. Why not say it in the past? Right? And we mentioned in the past the Malbim's very desperate teretz, which is horrific, but which has to have some essential meaning that we're going to have to explain. That I have to say any kafui tova, because if not, it looks like I'm a cheapo bringing like just a couple of fruit, and I want to bring a couple of no, don't misunderstand me. I'm not a kafui tova. Fine, all right, but I mean, obviously that has to be real on some level, not because it's cheap, but because of something else. We're going to have to figure out what is the real meaning to what the Malbim felt himself mechuyev to say, because what else are you going to say? And it has to make sense, obviously. So we already immediately detect the strange threads that interrelate the Parsha and the multi-level nature of the Parsha from the very beginning. Then we move on to the second part of that Ketuvah, which is a separate stuma within, and that is Vidui Maaser. So Vidui Maaser over here also is very strange. Why in the world I would specifically bring Vidui Maaser over here? Bechalal, Shana Shlishit, Shnat Maaser. Okay. Don't know. Next stuma is Hayom Hazeh Hashem Elokecha Mitzavcha Lasot Et HaChukim Ha'eleh, and then it gives this very unusual description of the relationship of Klal Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is so strange, we don't even know what it means. And that is, as Hashem ha'emarta hayom l'yot lecha l'goyim, v'lechet b'drachav, v'lishmor chukav u'mitzvotav u'mishpatav, v'lishmor b'kolo, v'Hashem ha'emircha hayom, l'yot lo la'am tzibura, kasher diber lo, lishmor kol mitzvotav. So then that means that somehow this introduction, whatever it means, all different pshatim in the Rishonim. Is it a lashon of amira? Is it a lashon of yit'amru kol po'alei avim? Does it mean gidel otcha? Does it mean through having spoken about you, so mameli you became noted? Like the Gemara says, "Atam asituni chativa achat ba'olam, afani aseh etchem chativa achat ba'olam." And this relates to the tefillin that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wears, and the nikah Yisrael, and all of the various aspects of the profound relationship, which is a wonderful way to begin the description of the bris. But instead, it's included here with the parsha of Bikurim and Vidui Maaser, which doesn't seem to make all that much sense that it would be included there. It would make more sense for it to be the psicha to the Divrei HaPris. Okay, so we're not quite sure what that would mean. The implications are very powerful. The implications are that what we took to be a sort of momentary tangent and maybe because we were attracted by its multi-levelness to recognize the implications of our Ami of the other on a personal level, so was actually the makor of our ability to say, Et Hashem Amir Chayom, Et Hashem Hamartai. In other words, there's something about the nature of Avos Bikurim and Vidui Maaser that directly addresses our understanding of what the meaning of the Knesset is. That seems to be the implications of the structure of the parshas. Difficult to understand how that could be, but that's what it seems to be saying. Okay, so then we begin our next parasha Ptucha. So that next parasha Ptucha talks about the way that you have in this machlokas in the Gemara, machlokas in Yerushalmi, that we're talking about 3 sets of avanim, 4 sets of avanim, moving the same avanim, different avanim. But however we learn it, there's some major elements are going on that have to do with the way in which we cross the Yarden and the impact that we leave upon the crossing of the Yarden. So in other words, we're taking out these stones, maybe we're putting in stones as well, putting with the Torah. The parshas of the way that the sugya comes out, take out the stones, carry them, bring them over to the Bokum Shem, the Hagizim and Harevo, write the Divrei Torah on them, turn them into Mizbeach, cover them with seed. Again, each step is a machlokas. Bring them back to the Malon. If there's a 4th set, then it means we put other avanim back, you have to write them into the Yarden. All things machlokas. But in any event, we're certainly leaving a major impact in the nature of our Knesset. And that nature of the Knesset is a permanent impact on the Yarden. We've already seen the centrality of the Yarden, and this has very much to do with the relationship that we found in the past. It's a very relationship of das. It's a very sexual relationship with Klal Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael. So we saw this before with the jumping of the Kekala, the Chosin across Kala, and the crushing of the Amoraim. So here too, there's like an element of removing the Basulim, so to speak. It's called Karka Psula. The Evan Avanim are taken out of Karka Psula, and you leave a ratio that's there in terms of the Knesset. And it's B'shas the Knesset itself that Yoshua has to tell us, as we see later on in Yoshua, that, Talmanas came, as the Gemara explains in the Yukim. If you're not ready to take upon yourself the need to be able to be kavesh and to get involved in whatever is necessary, then the Mei HaYarden are coming to Shotvim Otcha, and all of us together, Otchem, V'Anachnu. Okay, so that's a nice beginning, perhaps, to the bris, but what it means is that we view this bris indeed as being central to the idea of Ki-Tavo. In other words, it all involves the relationship to the physicality of the Knesset Eretz Yisrael and to the ongoing celebration of whether it's the annual event, whether it happened at the time, whether it's on the national level, the individual level, on the multiple levels of the way in which we experience that Knesset. And so, what's so special is that Moshe then, in the next Stuma, addresses Kohanim, the Leviim, and all of Klal Yisrael, and tells them to pay strict attention. Askei Shema Yisrael, Hayom hazeh nihiyet olam Hashem Elokeinu. Again, claiming that there's something unique about today, which we find later on, Ad Hayom hazeh, there's something about the way in which things are about to change. Some massive changes are about to take place. Later on, we discover that there's a whole new understanding of the nature of Avos and the way in which we have to square the number of Britot, because each group takes the responsibility for every other Yichdas Brit. So it's the 650,000 and so on, or 600,550 times that same amount has to be squared, because everybody's taking responsibility on everybody else's responsibility, not just on the actual mitzvahs, as the Gemara says, and that becomes a re-description of our understanding of the interrelationship with the Britot. Then we have the logistics, next student. So Vaitzav Moshe Ta'am, Eli Amdu Levarech Ta'am, Grizim, goes to the Shisha Shvatim that are in there, Eli Amdu Lakallah, Shisha Shvatim, and the Leviim down at the bottom. And then we have the 11 Arurim. Each one of them is given a separate Parsha Setuma, except perhaps for a very strange one that puts together two completely different things. And in our Sifrei Torah, they're made as a single Parsha Stuma, as opposed to every other one of the Arurim, which leads to a lot of arguments among the Daikonim and the Deres, whether this is a mistake and whether each one is supposed to be a separate Stuma, or whether, since the Rambam lists it as a single Stuma, and the words of the Rambam are all different Kabbalah in terms of the Sifrei Torah, and he had it checked against ultimately the Sifra Azora and so on. So then, because of that, the Mincha Shai Paskins like the Rambam, and we have it the way we have it, and we have one of them which puts together two totally unrelated things. But I mean, you can't get crazier than these two things. There's lots of things you could put together, but the last thing that you think to put together is Arur Matei Mishpat Ger Yatom Ve'almana, Ve'amar Kol Ha'amamein, and Arur Shochei V'Neshet Aviv Ki Gila Knaf Aviv, Ve'amar Kol Ha'amamein. This is a continuation of the strange presence of Knaf Aviv in the previous parsha, which also didn't make any sense, but which we explained over there in terms of Mitzvahs Yibum, since according to the Gemara, this becomes now Shomeret Yavam of Aviv. We never discussed Shomeret Yavam, and indeed some suggest the Mat Mishpat Ger Yatom Yamana may have something to do with the way that the Shomeret Yavam is directly connected to Gerus and to Geula, and so maybe it has something to do with that, and others related back to Reuven, which the Gila Knaf Aviv. How does that have to do with Mateh Mishpat Ger Yatom V'Amana? What was the cheshbon of all types of strange rules, which again don't appear here on the surface? And as soon as we complete the Arurim with the final stuma, Arura Shelo Yakim et Divrei Torah Azot, which is a big machloket. How do we understand Shelo Yakim? So according to Rashi, here HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving us in part of the bris to be Mekabel and Orur on all of the mitzvahs, which Ramban argues vehemently about, and brings also the nature of the idea of Tekuma, Yakim. It's not to be Mekayem, but to be Yakim. So it brings it's cute remes, the person who does Hagba, so that Hagba is the one who's Yakim et Divrei Torah, so this is lifting it up. But that's essentially the point, that you have the responsibility not simply on the kiyum on this. It's not like you're accepting a new order, but rather on the ability to make the Torah bar kayama, so to speak. So if you hear that there are people that are losing the Torah, that are misunderstanding the Torah, you want to be the one who's going to be making the Torah and therefore it's not enough to simply do the mitzvahs of Torah, but rather there's a commitment to the hakoma of the Torah. And we'll see that that may be very important for understanding the structure of the parsha itself. Then we have the following two petuchot. Those two petuchot are the brachos and the kvalos. Okay, so the pashtus, that's all that there is here, the brachos, the kvalos. In reality, there's something very sneaky that has been going on throughout the story. And the part that's sneaky is that all of the things that are mentioned here as givens are not givens. They're actually tremendous fiducian, which was sneaking in under the radar as if, you know all about this, right? I mean, you understand it when you're saying V'yir Meiser. I mean, you're supposed to say, well, how to go and I never did this. It's sort of eating baninas. Oh, yeah, I sort of forgot to mention that. It's this sort of baninas, from which we learn all of the data of this, even by Kochia. Kavachomer, by Sarakal, right? Often strange place to insert the data man who spoke about these issues before. Forgot about mentioning this. For some reason, I would use after the dinner of Meiser to tell me, and that there's a lot of Samachti, V'Simachti both, which appears now in the Mishnah and the analysis of, it's not just Rashi's Pshat, this is how the Mishnah understands the nature of the Meiser, which of course translates into one of the primary novelties of the bris, which is, again, as if we knew it all along, תחת אשר עבדתם את השם, לוקח בשמחה ובפלבב, במרוב כל, ועבדתם לשבטיכם, בעירום ובחוסר כל. This is like a brand new idea, which the Rambam only introduces in Hilchos Lulav, bringing a raya from that pasuk that somebody, and then he says the strangest thing, somebody who's monea himself. I mean, why don't you say somebody who's not happy? No, there's no such thing as not being happy. What makes it okay? Everybody's not happy. Monea? Somebody's monea himself for that happiness. Really paraminen. He deserves to be punished. And that's why it says, so this waits until Hilchos Lulav, the dinner Simcha Pesach Shoiva, sort of introducing them, Simcha Yisera Yasham, but no. It's at the end of Hilchos Lulav, general halacha, HaSimcha, Shismach, Adam, Asiyat, HaMitzvot, Avodah, Gdolai, etc., etc. And we mentioned it over here as if it's an agav given in the Bris, and the Rambam uses that agav, which is an immense innovation. Immense innovation. I mean, the only explanation, having never addressed it directly, but only in it's been monea oneself. I mean, that's what the Rambam is doing is no different than what the pasuk is doing. I'm not even discussing the fact that I expect you to be happy. I'm only discussing the fact that, what? You weren't happy? Which is exactly what the Rambam is saying. What? You're not happy? So but you never told me to do that. So that must mean that there's something about the nature of the presentation of the Brit itself that is definitively an act of Brit that not only demands happiness, but that results in happiness. So in other words, the happiness is a function of the way that this Brit is innovatively a Brit. One of the important nekudas of that, of course, is that it goes all the way back to the original problem of why we need the Brit, which has everything to do with the opening statement of Amar Ta'ala, She'eni Kafui Tova. Because the reason that I need a Brit is because the original Brit was destroyed by the fact that I was a Kafui Tova, which changes the entire idea of what's happening over here. Since Har Sinai is destroyed by the fact that we perceive it as Kaf Aleim Archegigis, and you'll notice that it is not coincidental that Kaf Aleim is Kafui, which of course gives us the only explanation to the nature of how in the world the fact that, as Moshe Rabbeinu said, after 40 years, he's being miramis to them what they should have known originally, that when I said to you, since you didn't see Atatitain, so Mimela, you are like Adam Arishan or Kafui Tova, Shema Isha Shematata Yimadim. So Tosfos says, well, I want to understand. How in the world does that prove that you're Kafui Tova? If anything, it proves that you're Makir Tova. In other words, I'm so Makir Tov. Look at Stam Shmo out there. If you're giving him this amazing gift of Atatitain. Okay, yeah, great, why not? But someone like me, who has tremendous hakaras teva, how can I accept such a gift? How is it possible to? It's overwhelming. So on the contrary, if anything, it proves that there's a higher darg of hakaras teva. How can you possibly say kfuyei tova v'nei kfuyei tova? I understand Isha Shalatati Madi, that's kfuyei tova. You're saying, yeah. But over here on the contrary, you're saying it's amazing, it's unbelievable. I want to chutzpah asking for such a thing. So it's dafka hakarat tova. Says Tosfos, the only possible explanation is that the only reason that you wouldn't have said Atatitain is not because you're not Makir Tova, but because you don't want to have to be Makir Tova. If you don't want to have to be Makir Tova, then the meaning of Kafui Tova is directly Kaf Aleim Archegigis. It has nothing to do with having gratitude. It has to do with whether you enjoy having gratitude or you don't enjoy having gratitude. So Kviyat Tova means that there's such a high darga of Hakaras Teva that it's crushing. So then it's Kviyat Tova. Because the Tova is, boom, Kof Ale Marka Gigas. It's like being crushed under the heart. In which case, the answer to the Malbim's question is obvious. What is it? I'm going to say to the Kohen, I'm a Makir Teva. That was the problem. I have to say any Kafui Tova. Where that lies in the word, but it's obvious that that's the point. If we're coming now to a new bris, this is the only way to address the new bris. Any Kafui Tova. Won't do a bit of good to say, oh, I'm so Makir Tova. I know, you idiot. That was the problem. Well, what are we going to do about that problem? Right? Oh, it's okay. Any Kafui Tova. I said, yeah, you're going to have to come to that anyway. Amazing. Come on, smile. Nobody dances, nobody smiles. Nothing. Okay. Very good, yeah. Maybe we should give out schnapps or something.
No, it has to be the way.
The average Rebbe's get that right. You know. The Rebbe's going to say something. You got to get everybody high enough to like dance and sing. Okay, so it's a little bit vodka oriented, but.
Why isn't the din of Simcha not in the Torah?
Okay, wonderful question. Let's take it for. Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. Okay, but that's just an example. These things. The most horrific example. I don't know. I think certainly one of the 10 most, at least, if not the most, choshva mitzvahs in the Torah in terms of the impact, is the mitzvah that defines the entire nature of the Derech Hashem, which is the Derech of Avram Avinu. There's only one mitzvah that defines the entire Hilchos Deis, essentially. The basis of all Hilchos Deis, pass me the let them young people take. Just pass me the Torah Chaim. Torah, you're right next to it. Put your feet out. Unbelievable. In the middle of this whole jazz, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, you know, we're going to have all these brochas. Yekimcha Hashem lo la'am kadosh kashem nishba lo. Ki tishmor et mitzvot Hashem elokecha v'halachta b'drachav. Just a side mention. V'halachta b'drachav. Side mention of v'halachta b'drachav. That's everything. V'halachta b'drachav. That's the entire Derech Hashem, from beginning to end. A mitzvah that, as the Chinuch says, B'kol makom, u'b'kol zman, al-zecharim v'al-nekevot, and even transgenders. Everybody is chayav in this, at all times, at all places. And how many mitzvahs are like that? So this we mention, like sneaking it in under the radar, together with the various mitzvahs that we never heard before of the Seder Shel Pesach. Oh, by the way, yeah, I never did mention what that was about, you know, or the din of Achila, Vaninas, Bakotchim. I mean, it's unbelievable. This after the entire story in Shmini, where these were Nogel Halacha right away, the Parasha of Vanina. But we don't know it until here. Here is where we have the mitzvah. No. Aha. Good point. Good point. Rav Avad is pointing out, but we already sort of took for granted the Lechet Midrachav back at the beginning, no? Where we said, Ayom Hashem Elokecha Mitzavcha, Es Hashem Emarta Ayom, all of that. Lishmor Chukav Mitzvotav Lishmor, but it says so that V'lo Lechet Midrachav. However, the difference between V'lo Lechet Midrachav, Rav Avad, and v'halachta b'drachav is the difference between Lashon Tzibur. And here's the Lashon Tzibur. So the Chinuch says, Kfar Niskar also makes in the beginning of the Lo Lachas b'drachav. And before as well.
Why is it only the Tzibur if it's here as a T'nai?
It doesn't matter, but the words still say v'halachta b'drachav.
So in fact, we can read it.
Right. So it's the only place where it's specifically said, and you do this.
So it's a
So
different
it's not
reading of the
if
purpose, in
you
other
do
words.
this.
If you like,
It's
if you do all
if
this,
and
then
do
they
this,
rock
right.
the-
So in other words, this requires that which you must do. So here, these are the closing mitzvahs of the Torah. Mitzvahs kriyal bikurim, mitzvahs vidui meiser, mitzvah lidamayis b'Hashem. Those are the mitzvahs I say. Shalom lachol meiser sheni ba'aninus, shalom lachol meiser sheni b'tuma, shalom lahotzi d'mei meiser sheni b'shar dvarim, sheni b'afilu b'shtiyah. These are like sort of central things. They belong earlier, not things that should be snuck in beneath the radar. I mean, we would have accepted it. I think we know about it a little earlier too. So this mitzvah to appear over here, because it's immense, long chinuch, because, and in the most beautiful explanation of the Shorshei HaMitzvah, usually goes into great detail, the Shorshei HaMitzvah, what it means, why it's so chashuv, and so on and so forth. He says, Shorshei HaMitzvah, he v'shorsho davar echad.
Wow.
What's the point of explaining what the shorish is? That's what the mitzvah is what the shorish is. But I'm telling you, this is the entire content of everything that you're doing in terms of all of your behavior. But I have to explain like why this is important. What the purpose is. The purpose is the purpose that it says. I mean, there's no way to amplify it. I mean, so that itself shows how, like, so this we're waiting till here. It's like the last mitzvah in the Torah. We're waiting to hear Valachta b'drachav. And the Rambam puts it like from the first mitzvah in the entire Sefer. It's Valachta b'drachav. It's unbelievable. Which again implies that just as those earlier mitzvahs have something to do with the nature of the Brit itself, as we've already seen with the inyanim of Das and Hakaras Tova, which, of course, I mean, if you think about it, the deeper aspects of Hakaras Tova relate back to Adam Arisha in the most primal ways. In other words, in the same way that over here, the Vavata Mesavecha, the Aaron of the Chosar Kol, is seen as a direct derivative of not being in touch with the Hakara of a unity that leads to your own experience and to sympathy. This is what led to the goals from Gan Eden. This is what led originally to mortality. And the same thing happens at Har Sinai. So the Ani Amarta Elohim Etem and Bnei Kolchem Ochem Ki Adam Timotov. So the idea of the Lo Yid Boshash, which is somehow a sense of not recognizing, on the simple level, people think it's merely on the issue. Well, simply people think stupid things, and that it means embarrassment. And so on. Obviously, there's no room for embarrassment before the state. It's ridiculous. But the loyal Boshashu means there's no shame. There's no embarrassment. So I'm going to say in English. Have you no shame? So have you no shame means that why does it? You take your existence for granted. Like there's nothing that you have to think about. So the loyal Boshashu means not simply entitlement. It's something much, much more profound. And there's this basic conceit about the nature of being. And if I am constantly in a state of shock and surprise at the fact that I can exist, it's impossible for there to be an instant of loyal Boshash. Because my entire existential stance is a constant. I mean, this couldn't possibly go on for another instant, could it? It's too insane. It's too surprising. Where the heck would it be coming from? So then any possible elements that would take you out of the nature of existence as a whole would be immediately perceived by you as death itself, as a yawning chasm of hell. Because I certainly can't exist. So the only connection that I have to being would be because somehow, because there's a Bria, and because there's a universe, because I'm a kusha to it, somehow magically I'm there too. right? So there's this constant input, influx. It's impossible for there to be loyal parshashu and not to consider that in any moment of relationship, the relationship defines me. It's not something that I do. It's the thing that allows me to be. So that means that Hakaras Teva, ultimately, without Ki-Tavo, implies that transition from the conceit of existence into the commonality of existence, in which consciousness is experienced not as something personal, but as the word consciousness implies, as something that can only be there because of the fact that there's a universe which supports it. In which case it's impossible to be kafui tova, because nothing external could possibly be a kviyah. It can only give me something, by definition. So the more sensitive I am to that vulnerability, the more astonishingly I need to hold on to whatever is being offered me as a possibility of being. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, mi tein, ata tein. Oh, you don't feel overwhelmed? Overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed by the fact that I don't have this. I don't understand. That's what's overwhelming. Where am I coming from? This is crazy. Here I am floating around in space, Give me at least like a little pod to sit in. So obviously it's just possible to talk about Kviyas Tova. It's nonsensical. So this goes all the way back to the Achen Adam is indeed the ultimate Achen Adam of Elohim Sharshu, and therefore the Gemara Avodah Zarah talks about Adam being a Kafri Tova. So then that means that the relationship over here, Simcha, Knisa La'aretz, Das, is already beginning to represent an interwovenness which gives a structure to the parsha, perhaps not yet, so we can understand why one thing comes here, one thing comes there. But thematically, there's a very intense working on these ultimate primal things that must be the basis of this new breed, and that therefore are part of the way that I experience it. And the way that I experience it becomes the Tachas Hashem Avad Tachas Hashem Alakav B'Simcha V'Tovayva. So the very fact that you can be miserable about life means by definition that you're a Kafri Tova. There's no B'Simcha V'Tovayva, or even if there's any lack of enthusiasm, it's coming because I believe I am what I am, and now somebody's coming to give more orders. Or instead of being able to relax, now there's something external being imposed on me. The very fact that I can think of something external being imposed on me means that I've removed myself from what is going on in reality. Right? You understand this so far? And it's a very primitive description of it, because we haven't reached an understanding of what the real deeper issues are. One of the shocking novelties here, I should call them innovations, is that even though we've had a mitzvah of Yiras Hashem until now, but the phrasing in the clause of the nature of Yira becomes the way in which the Rambam introduces HaKadosh Baruch Hu to us in Hilchos Yisrael. We had to wait until now to hear about it. And that was that after saying all of these horrible, horrible things, and that was Im lo tishmor lasot et kol divrei haTorah hazot haktuvim b'sefer hazeh lirat Hashem hanichbad v'hanora hazeh et Hashem Elokecha. Now, this sudden distance, instead of as Hashem Elokecha Tirah, into Hashem HaNichbad VaNorah, sounds like some new fruity has taken over the writing over here. All of a sudden Hashem has suddenly appeared here instead of Hashem Elokecha, And we're back to, that's, I'd much rather hear about Hashem Elokecha, not Hashem. So, but clearly, if the Rambam adopts these words for his usage of the presentation of the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem Ha'el on this bad, using this language, or the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem, Hashem Hagadol, right? That means that our vision of Hashem, as opposed to Es Hashem Elokecha Tira, which seems to be the Iker description of the mitzvah of the Yira, it's taken on as much a changed personality as the nature of the bris in terms of Takas HaShalah, the simple to flavor. We're taking for granted a massive evolution of our perception, what it is that we're relating to in terms of the bris. And it's like thrown in there as if, well, you understand that, don't you?
Does it appear in Torah, this Lashon Hashem?
No, this is the Bakar.
This is the only time he uses this language?
We can look up if it's the only time if we find Hashem and think about that.
It's the only time.
The only time. Yeah. It's the only time. Anyway.
Sounds like the
Yeah.
Kabbalah more.
Yeah. It's Mamish the other time. Amazing. Yirat Hashem and Ekman. That's it. From here we learn out the entire nature, that relationship to Hashem.
In the Yeshayahu, we have just Ayeh Hashem B'Kirbo. No,
it's nothing. Something else could be.
Marx, is it?
What?
In the shop. Just-
Right, it's Hashem, like
Yeah,
yeah, but it's
Carl talks about Kilul Hashem, but I mean, this idea of Hashem, that's the present. That's because over there you need to say the Shem in order to be Mikala. It needs to be Mevater the Shem in order that's Yaka Yossi at Yossi, as the Gemara says. Therefore it says it's Hashem. It's not because we're relating to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as Hashem and Echad. This idea of Shem is unique to here. So what I would like to do now that we have a sense of the threads and some of the patterns of what's happening, after we go to Ma'ariv, which is now, then we can move on, B'ezras Hashem, after Ma'ariv, to get a deeper sense of the tremendous tradition of this Brit and how they, because specifically of these mitzvahs, how they completely redefine for us our experience of reality itself, and therefore lead to the assumptions that can be made here in recreating a bris that no longer can possibly suffer from the chesronos of the bris on Har Sinai, which was experienced as kafir. Because of that, we have a reconstruction at the end. This has to do with the Atem Re'item of the original bris. It's part of the Knesset Labrit of understanding who you are, because it's a new understanding of who you are. Okay, so to be continued.